So this is morning for us in Los Angeles and Monterey, California, so far. Gabe and Lensis are here. Esther is doing history homework, and Jackie and Tom are going to join shortly, perhaps some others. But one of the issues we talk about here is beginning to have a conversation that's based in absolute principles and start to think in terms that are absolutely reliable and dependable and whole and complete and moral and virtuous and so common, as the definition of humility is common as dirt, meaning so familiar, so natural, so easy, so readily available, to start to see that this idea of an infinite source is not grandiose at all if it exists. The idea that it be something as vast as something that can't even be named and can't even be quantified and can't be spoken of in terms sufficient other than in reference, like many things. We can refer to them, we can never quite define. There's always something going on that's indefinable in the essence of everything. And in this essence we're talking about, if it is infinite, it is not arrogant to imagine that as our source. It would be natural to imagine that as our source. It would not be prideful or anything other than simply conceding that if it is, period. And if it is as vast as we're talking about, that would be a very reliable source because it wouldn't change while our thinking changes. It would stay the same. So regardless of what I do in my thinking, I can loop off in any number of directions because I can choose to think whatever I want. And as I do that, it's kind of like throwing a ball in the air. It's going, whatever the velocity that I give it and the aim that I give it, there's going to be an arc for that ball depending on how much it weighs and where the ground is in relation to it. It's going to take that same arc, that exact arc. And so too will my stories, and so too will my thoughts, and so too will the things I create and imagine. If my imagination is thinking that who I am is the creator of reality, I begin to think that I become my thoughts. And now I'm stuck in those thoughts, not being able to escape from those thoughts, and feel fairly horrified and traumatized as a present condition of making believe who I am is what I think. And that's all that I am. And if there's any limit, it isn't an infinite source that's limited. It's the thinking I'm doing about that source, about reality, about my experience. My experience is being created largely by my thinking about reality, but my experience and the possibility of that has been created by reality in some way, somehow, however it's been, whether it's evolution, creation, or both, doesn't matter. The point isn't to try to define it in a way that's arguable, but concede that whatever it is, it exists now for us to be even able to have this conversation and start to reckon with that and start to notice that and start to pay attention to that and speak from that point. So as to your point, Lensis, that we started with earlier, you were talking about, go ahead, maybe you can describe it better.
Okay, yesterday, something in my kitchen, it was broken, okay? So I started feeling very anxious, like anxiety. Oh my God, because I could not cook and I could not clean my dishes, and that was disturbing. My brain was very, and I would have fear, and what can I do? So I called my ex because I needed help. So after he called a plumber, and before of that, I noticed my anxiety. I noticed my brain was disturbed. So when I realized that those feelings were unnatural because of the situation, I noticed, okay, Lindsay, this is natural because this is a problem here. So calm, but my brain feel calm when I receive the answer, like somebody's helping you and everything will be okay. So at that point, I feel peace and my brain was calm, not disturbing anymore.
So would you say when you initially reacted that you were reacting identically to the situation or with a little larger overreaction? sort of a greater sense of peril and oh no, and what do I do and how do I handle this and what, almost a
It
little more
was,
excited about it than the simplicity of the fact that you need a plumber.
I was, I was I had fear, something
Yeah.
like that. It was like
Yeah.
disturbing. My brain was
Right.
like, oh my God, okay, I have this problem. Okay, what can I do? Okay, let's see. And I was like, oh, what can I do? Because um, this is not a first problem that I have. So before of that, I had some problems that I fell twice, and twice I had to go to the hospital because one my here was I had something here, and the second something had in my finger. So I was scared about, okay, what can I do? I need help. But I think it was natural because my brain knows, okay, here is a danger. This is danger. So you need to do something. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I need to do something. So I need to call. I need to make a call. And then when I hear, okay, somebody's going to help you, I just feel, okay, all those feeling that I
Mhm.
felt, it was natural because something was going on.
So I don't want to speak to your experience, but I'm going to make a couple suggestions.
Yes.
And one of them is that if you look at the experience as the experience and notice that the reaction may be a little outsized for the actual experience, it's a revelation that there's some pent up anxiety that isn't being addressed. It's actually building inside of you. And my experience is that that outsized nature of hyper-reactivity is finally, it's like a pinprick. A pin can pop a balloon, but a bat cannot. And
Yes.
sometimes the smallest little thing gives us a chance to notice that there's a lot going on in us that we don't even pay attention to because we've gotten so good at managing it that we think being numb to it is actually saving us, when in fact it's putting us to sleep. Numbness in the body is an indication of something wrong. It's trying to protect us from the pain. Well, if there's pain there, that's telling us something's wrong. And the pain, if it's emotional, since it seems invisible, it shows up in the visibility. Since there are no secrets, there's nothing hidden. Everything secretes through our body: blood, sweat, tears, anxiety, stress, reactiveness. All of those things are indications of something happening, and they'll be simultaneous to the actuality of what's happening rather than the ideas we have about it that may be trying to manage it and defend and protect, because we feel better when we're not doing those things, but we're actually getting better at feeling worse, which isn't healthy in the long run.
Yes.
So collectively, we sort of conspired to come up with ways to feel better, when in fact, if what we're feeling better is getting worse, that is not helping us at all. So actually feeling better is getting better at feeling what we're feeling as we're feeling it, while we're feeling it, and simply noticing that if it's happening, to your point, it's natural. And it is naturally described. Like I'm standing in front of the mirror, and that image in the mirror is going to be exactly what me standing in front of it. The body that I have standing in front of that mirror is going to reflect. If I think that I can talk the mirror out of how I look because I don't like what I see, that would be a long day's effort to go nowhere and have nothing change other than my opinion of how I look. And basically, I'm creating an insane delusional idea to give myself the impression that I'm in control of it because I'm absolutely fantasizing about reality. So the idea of out of control, those little pinpricks of experiences, and I have these, I get those jolts. Something. I see the tenant calling me, and all of a sudden, the building's on fire. These thoughts that are well beyond the probability. They're possible, but they're probably not probable. The likelihood is very, very unlikely. And yet the immediacy of that reaction reveals that there is a level of anxiety that's being maintained and a level of stress that's being maintained by my making believe that because I'm not thinking about it, it isn't happening, which is basically the source of ignorance. Ignoring things is ignorance. That is not intelligence. It's not super intelligence. It's artificial intelligence, as a matter of fact.
Yes. But the most important thing is I noticed. Okay, like this is
Yeah, yeah,
natural. This is
yeah.
natural. You have that right to feel this. Okay, you're a human. But now let's fix this.
Now, see, the bigger issue is noticing that if there's any out, I'll leave you to consider this, but
Mhm.
if there's any outsizedness, if there's any minimization or any maximization, it's trying to make out of something it isn't by thinking we
Mm.
can minimize it or maximize it. And again, we're making believe thinking is the controller of the universe. And so when we feel out of control, we're actually noticing that there is no control in fantasy. There is no control in delusion other than the idea that it's real. And even that isn't real because it's insane to make believe that we're actually able to control something that doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
the idea of Jackie and Tom are with us now. The idea of
Hello, Jackie.
fixing ourself
Mm.
is the idea of fixing a self, not that's broken, but that doesn't exist. It's just ideas. It's literally what we're thinking about our experience that we call ourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's our thinking of itself, when in fact that produces more and more thoughts, which is what obsessive thinking effectively is. When I go off on a path of thinking my thinking's going to heal the problem I'm creating, I now become the master and the slave and wonder why I can't stop it, because I'm thinking about it as the effect rather than seeing that I am the cause. I'm the absolute cause of initiating it. And until I stop initiating it, it's going to continue. It's going to persist as long as I resist the actuality of what I'm doing.
Jack, you know what is interesting? I noticed that talking with the people that I needed to talk about that
Yeah.
situation yesterday made me feel calm, helped
Yeah.
me a lot. So that is important
Right.
to have a team around us to talk.
Yes.
This is wonderful. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful because when we are facing those feelings, something happened in our brain. We cannot think 100% right. We think that it's the end of the world, something like that.
Well, very good. Okay, so then the suggestion that that may have been a little outsized probably makes some sense, because the idea of it being the end of the world. Think about this now. Our thinking of it as reality, becomes what we think of the world as being.
Mm-hmm.
And what's actually ending when the end of the world seems to be approaching is the end of the thinking we're doing about the thinking we're doing. We're starting to see, but here's the irony, the sad irony, the sick irony. We're trying to defend that world by maintaining it and
Mm.
pretending we're not doing it, when we're already in a world
Mm-hmm.
with an absolute nature that's in
Mm-hmm.
perfect order. And it's what I'm thinking about it that I think now becomes the world. I am not afraid
Ah.
of dying because there is no death in an infinite source. I am afraid of living because what I'm doing is
Mm.
considering my life to be based on thoughts that aren't true. And then I'm squandering the opportunity to speak in terms that are absolute and awesome and adventurous and fulfilling and complete and joyful and beneficial and extraordinary compared to the ordinary nature of this depreciated idea I have about my own existence and my own self and myself, yourself, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm happy that we have this group of beautiful people. We can share things that we can understand more, that we can.
well, and you know it though, don't you?
Yeah,
If you hear
and
it and it registers, it's because you know it, not because I think it. You
mm,
have a sense of it. Yeah.
that
So
is
that sensation is common to all of us, because that's ultimately, if there is a self, it's a capital S rather than a small s. And that self as a capital S would be the one we all share, which is the essence, the source. The self becomes the source, the absolute nature of nature. And I
mm,
don't mean nature just as being trees and plants and minerals and such, animals. I mean nature as the essence of this universe, as far as our human experience goes. Doesn't mean that it's limited by this universe, because if this universe is growing, wherever it is right now is limited. So we
mm,
can think of it in forever terms, as though it's going to eventually become whole and complete But if we're thinking in forever terms rather than absolute present terms, it's kind of a torture chamber, because we can wait forever for forever, and there's still forever to wait. Rather than see that the present nature is here, it's now, it's absolute, it isn't convertible, it isn't immutable, it isn't violable, it isn't something that will change. It just is the present state of our present state. We're always in the present, and the insanity is thinking we're not. Doesn't mean we can't think we're not, but when we think we're not and think that's true and think it's real, now we've transitioned into, once again, thinking we're the creators of reality and wonder why we're struggling with reality, because reality was created as a gift rather than one that comes as a result of thought.
Wow.
So if you didn't know it, you wouldn't recognize it, and it wouldn't be obvious. And at the same time, if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know what's wrong. The wrong, the conflicts, the emotional turmoil, the mental anguish are all indications that we're based in a platform of principles that are all-knowing, ever-present, always aware, and always knowing. That's our knowingness. If we didn't know that, we wouldn't know what was wrong. We'd have nothing to compare it to, and the wrong would be right. And in fact, the only thing we could do. We would have no choice, because that would be our essence. And the fact that we can think about it and be perplexed by it and be upset over it and be disturbed by it and feel mental anguish is an indication that we absolutely know better. And I mean, know we know. Not think we know, but know we know. Start to notice that absolute sensation that we have, that peace, that awareness, that awe-inspired inspiration is actually wisdom. And wisdom isn't unintelligible. It isn't a stupefaction or a dumbing down of our potential intellect, which is what numbing is. It's trying to deny that anything is better so that we can live in a tiny bubble and think because the bubble seems right, we got it all right. When in fact, the wrong is we're missing the potential to actually communicate on a basis that is absolutely everyone's well aware of. We're just not talking about openly. We're not discussing it openly. So we're not sharing it as openly as we're actually sharing it.
Yes.
Infinitely right now. Morning, James.
Morning,
James
guys.
is visiting Lenses.
Hello, James.
Hi, Lenses.
Hello.
Hey, Gabe and Jackie.
Tom, are you there?
Hello.
Can you hear? Tom and Jackie are on the road.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, we're here. Jackie.
Tom, I wanted to mention something.
So good to hear you.
Yes.
We had a little time before I spoke to Jackie and Tom as they're driving up to Mount Shasta. And a couple of points I wanted to make, Tom, that sort of lingered in my head afterward.
Oh, okay.
We were talking about forgiveness, and we were talking about the idea of letting go. And when there's nothing to let go of, the real idea of letting go is starting to see that there's nothing we're hanging on to in the present because of its delusion.
Right.
It doesn't mean denying it. It just means that, wow, I've really been creating ideas that aren't true and making believe they're true. And I'm struggling with that.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely.
two things. Choice always allows not to be chosen. Always. So this idea that we have no other choice is an idea of addiction, because addiction's a lie, and lies promise is a broken promise, always. But the promise of a lie is always dysfunction, failure, and yet it's the lesson we need to correct. And it shows how perfectly balanced we are within the context of what seems to be wrong, because we're being given information that's absolutely accurate to the thing we're creating in our own experience, based on the thinking we're doing that is deficient, depreciated, dysfunctional. So in a way, it's all perfectly functional when we start it's kind of like we've gone to class all semester, never opened the textbook, never listened to the teacher, and wonder why we can't take the test. So the curriculum we're getting or the experience that we're having.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Now,
that makes complete sense.
When you see it that way, the question is, how willing am I to learn today? from this? How really willing am I to say,
Right.
wow, if I am making this up,
Yeah.
I have an investment. I think there's going to be a payoff. My interest in that investment is going to be the payoff that someday is going to give me a profit. There's some investment
Right.
in that thinking.
That's really true and very interesting. And again, sort of aligned with what Jackie and I were sort of saying as we started our road trip. And it's just to paint a little context for the others too. So Jackie and I started this road trip. And when we got on the road at 6 a.m., we realized that we had a very similar experience recently. And our responses were very similar. But it was so great to speak with you because, again, I think, even since we've spoken, what's been going around in my mind is, okay, well, wait a minute, like, stop the thinking. And now yourself to be in the present and to find what I know in the present. And then let my thinking, which is a gift, come from that, as opposed to some imaginary situation that I've boiled and scripted and that is me right now. So technically it doesn't even really exist in my reality, or doesn't need to exist in my reality.
Well,
does that make sense?
Your reality is not real.
Right.
So you're already present. You're already in the know because we're of it.
Yeah.
We're not creating it. We're not choosing it.
Exactly.
We're of it. It's a product of it. You're always in the present. There is no other place you can possibly be ever. And
right.
to begin to confirm that dispels this isn't about not thinking. It's about starting to see that when we think things that are lies can become true, we choose to act impossibly in a direction that is going to cause enormous friction, and then think by trying to resolve the friction so it doesn't have sparks flying out of the wheels, that we've given everyone the impression that we're fine. So it isn't it's not about stopping thinking, because that's basically a coma or death. It's literally about starting to see. I would encourage you to ramp up the thinking and start to notice the impact it has on you. And when you begin to see that you're causing this sort of depressing anxiety, you'll start saying, well, boy, if I can ramp it up, if I can increase it, if I can make it worse, I know that I can get better. And I would say better than that. I know I'm already better, or I wouldn't be suffering the consequences of knowing something's wrong. Just wouldn't occur to me.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's right, Jack. That brings us to where we were. Like, we wouldn't have had that presence of mind to be like, something doesn't feel right if
you didn't know better.
Steer us in a different direction.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Well, love's the operative word.
We're on a pilgrimage, everybody.
To Mount Shasta.
Higher power.
It's
one of the chakras of the universe.
Well, I'm glad we get to participate on your journey up there.
Thank you.
As they say, it is not the destination, it's the journey.
Right.
Or as has been said.
Thank you, everybody, for being on the journey. Yeah.
So another point to one of your points, Tom, you asked, why do I keep drawing these things? Why do I keep drawing these things? And if you think of matter in the universe, the more matter there is, the greater the gravitational draw, right?
We going through a little hillside. Sorry about that. So I only heard the very last.
Can you hear me?
Let's go.
We'll wait for you guys to get into better reception, and I'll go back to that.
Can you hear us?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay.
You good, Tom?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
We can hear you.
Okay. So think of gravity. Gravity is based on matter. Matter attracts matter. That's how gravity works. The bigger the gravitational pull the bigger the mass, right? The greater the matter. Matter occupies space. Okay? You hear? I think we're losing them in space, but they'll come back. They'll find us. James, what's happening?
I'm just getting up and working on cleaning up my room.
Attaboy.
And but had a good weekend. Played some volleyball yesterday. I don't know if this is relevant, but I'm doing some cool therapy stuff. That's like EMDR. That's like more about just like letting yourself feel stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is good because I feel like a lot of that reactive thinking comes from that stuck energy.
Well, it isn't stuck. You're denying it's there and wondering why you feel stuck.
Right.
So we want to blame everything else other than what we're doing when we're doing things we don't think we're doing. So that's very much part of what we're talking about. So it's kind of what I just said to Tom about embracing it. Rather than stopping the thinking, start to ramp it up a little bit, and you begin to realize, oh, wow, I can really create horrible experiences.
Right.
And it becomes much less sensible when you acknowledge you're doing it. So you have the perspective to say, I don't have to continue to, there's no obligation for me to continue this. That would be ridiculous. So the idea of managing it and trying to keep it small, trying to keep it manageable so it doesn't bother us, is actually maintaining it to the point that it explodes, like Lensis was talking about a little before you came on, I think. You have a little experience that seems to be just, the world's going to end. Some
Right.
small deviation. So it sounds like embracing it.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, consider you're already doing it. It's just the thinking you're doing about it that gives you alternative, sort of alternate seeming realities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're doing it, you're already having it. And this idea that we can not have it because we think we don't have it is putting our experience to sleep, making believe that somehow we're in control of reality. Rather than notice it's having an impact on our system, regardless of what we think. And to begin to concede that is to see that it's, as Lensis said earlier before you came on, that it's natural for our bodies to respond and to help us be aware of the things we're doing so we can better adjust the thinking that we're doing about the things that are happening. We get smarter, literally. Because dumbing down and numbing things is a way of ignoring things, and ignorance is the basis of ignoring.
I also finally got a car. You'll be happy to know.
Oh my God. You've been Ubering and riding a bike as long as I've known you.
The bike got stolen like a week and a half ago, and finally I was like, all right, that's enough. I'll finally concede.
Well, that's good. I hope that gives you some agility.
Yeah.
And I think to your point too, and to Lensis, to begin to notice, we can talk about absolute reality, but to begin to notice the flexibility we have and starting to consider this other experience that we're having with our thinking, to begin to notice that we have a major impact on it, is to begin to sort of be yogis in our thinking, starting to notice, oh, this thinking is actually, I feel stuck, but I can't be stuck. What I'm stuck on is the idea that I'm stuck. And start to notice as soon as those things, as soon as we have them, we literally have something to let go of. As soon as we realize they're just fantasy to begin with, you begin to realize we've only been holding on to an idea about the thing we've been doing that's also an idea, which is just basically an illusion being considered reality. The only time I get stuck is because I believe it. I'm sure of it. I'm relying on it as though it's real rather than simply noticing it's a thought that I have transmuted into reality that isn't reality. It's just a thought. It's always just a thought. And how I treat it and what I do with it is what gives me those varying, conflicted, depressing impressions. They're positions I take. And to think if it's real, it's the only position I can take, puts me at odds with anyone who takes any other position. And historically, humans have been fighting over that. Thinking becomes very, very, very fundamental to the health of everyone else. So thinking the same becomes critical, and any deviation in that thinking seems to put our lives at risk. And our lives aren't at risk, it's the thought life that we're having, the world that we think we're in, that seeming reality that isn't reality that we're struggling with. And it's easy to do because it's possible. It's also easy to start to see how beautifully designed our systems are, our bodily systems, to give us the information accurately, the curriculum, like I was talking to Tom about, to give us the actual information of what we're doing. It's telling us in the disturbance. It's not telling us in the brain is giving those feelings words, but the brain normally aligns to saying things like, my brain tends to say, I feel bad, I feel wrong, I feel less than, I feel disconnected, I feel alone. I start noticing that what I'm actually really feeling are my thoughts. And when my thoughts have no basis, to think I am alone is to again think my thinking is my reality rather than simply something I'm doing with my thoughts. So to see thoughts as something I have is to see that there's something I do. And since thinking is an action, since it's something that occurs, I can begin looking at it responsibly rather than reactively, rather than thinking I need to fight for it and deny it and act as though it's not happening by making believe that I can numb myself and that numbing myself is actually growth. It's really, I'm putting myself to sleep with these ideas. Now, if I think I'm sleeping and I'm not actually sleeping, it's worth starting to notice that when I have those thoughts, I'm continuing to manicure and maintain those ideas and realize that I'm always awake, I'm always present, I'm always fully alert, I'm always in the know, I'm always aware in my essence. I just don't think I am when I'm relying on thinking as my source. And to begin to disband that is to start to see that it's only the thought I'm having now. The only time anything ever happens is in the present. So the only problem that's created is now. The only solution that's created is now. To see it as natural is very healthy because it doesn't mean it's natural to continue to think of it as reality. The unnatural, unhealthy, diseased, reactive, impulsive, compulsive qualities become obvious as something I am doing that's wrong rather than making believe because I think it's natural, everything I'm doing is right. The difference between right and wrong in this universe is that one applies and will work every time, and everyone can utilize that information. Everybody. Once they see me ride a bike, everybody can ride a bike for the most part. But if all I am is struggling with things in terms of appearance, I am promoting the idea that the only thing in life there is to do is struggle. And sort of reinforcing that grid of fear and that disconcerted sensation and that sort of depressing seeming reality. Jackie and Tom, when you're back in range, let us know.
Hi, can you hear us?
We're back.
We're back.
Okay. So, Tom, on another point, you said, why do I keep looping back, doing the same
Yes.
things? Okay, so think of gravity in the universe. It's all about matter, right?
Hmm.
If a planet is
Yes.
huge, it's going to draw, like our moon relies on the gravity of the planet for it to orbit, right? And we're held
Yeah.
by this gravity naturally. We're not, it's very hard to escape. The amount of
I know.
power in
Yeah.
a rocket to escape the gravitational pull is enormous, right? So think of the gravity of a situation as the
Hmm.
matter
Hmm.
is the things we think matter.
Mm.
And to the degree I make believe there's something I'm doing is true, I'm resisting reality and then confirming the resistance by trying to oppose it and stop doing it. I'm confirming that I think it's real to think there's something to oppose, and it creates pressure.
Right.
And that pressure is literally, I would say, equal to the amount of matter I have invested in that, how much I think it matters, which is why we talk about the gravity of the situation, the weight of it, which, by the way, is
Right. Right.
very depressing.
Interesting.
So our brains
Yeah.
are like little universes.
Absolutely.
Our brains are functioning on the exact same basis that the universe functions on because they're products of the universe, natural universe.
Right.
We're actually made of components that are not from Earth, but may now be a part of Earth.
Mm.
Stardust, like Joni Mitchell told us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes complete sense to me. But also, this is just coming to me right now as you say this, and I don't know how relevant it is, but what's interesting to me is what I'm taking with me right now is because where I am right now is this beautiful, expansive road where you can just see vastness, and it's absolutely beautiful, right? I could, or I was, one of the things, whether, and maybe it's just, relationships, or maybe it's career or whatever, like when you start to get into those thought patterns, um, it pulls, even though physically I'm here, it's like I'm not really present because I'm thinking about another world that actually, it doesn't, like you have said, doesn't really exist yet right now, right? Like I'm just creating the story in my mind, but it isn't necessarily really true or really happening.
I guarantee you no story is true.
Right.
Because if the moment is filled with everything that's happening, no story could possibly account for all of it until we
Right.
simply concede that the present
Also,
is the present is the accumulation of everything that's ever occurred and the
right.
potential for everything that possibly can happen. All now, always, always, always.
Right.
So when you think you're not in the present simply because you're thinking about something else, and thinking is something we do naturally, it would be
Yeah.
natural to be in the present thinking about other things.
Okay. All right.
But
That's
when
fair.
we're thinking about it as reality, we think we're not in the present, and it starts this whole cavalcade of conflict, so that the idea of being innovative and adventurous in our thinking and the awe-inspired in our thinking gets completely
Yeah.
lost because it's very depressing and
Yeah. Yeah.
demeaning and creates
Yeah.
this sense of disintegration and detachment and aloneness and all that kind of stuff.
Got it.
We're really witnessing and experiencing the essence of the thinking we're doing that has no denominator, no substance. And we've been operating on the numerator, trying to get the numerator to work,
To
but there's
create some
nothing but zero in the denominator. So that's why in addiction that you
Right.
cannot get, when enough is not enough, it's because you're trying to fill something that's already full. Even emptiness is full of emptiness.
Right.
So where you are is not in the place your body is in, because that essence isn't in time and space. It's well beyond and within. It's something that is a dimension that isn't a dimension. It's a time that isn't a time. It's a present. My sense is the present isn't in time because it's always new. There is no end to it because there is no beginning. There never, in the absolute sense, there's no beginning and there's no end. So that's what would define infinite in an absolute sense. I think reception may be another. Yeah, I think they're back in the no cell zone. Gabe?
Yes, sir.
Last week, we left on a couple of things that I made a note about. Let me see if I can find. So one of the questions you had is, why do I wake up with those sort of depressing thoughts?
Every day.
Why does it keep happening? And to the degree that we don't think we're doing what we're doing, we continue to do the same thing we're doing. Right?
Yeah.
Because we don't think we're doing it. So it would be natural that that thing, that seeming undercurrent, would kind of haunt us in this way that we think it's something happening to us, and it's just causing us to feel once more demoralized and irresponsible for what's happening. I wrote the addictive insistence to resist our involvement equals obsessive thoughts persistence.
Yeah, they dissipate, by the time I, get a shower and get a coffee and like get back to my day.
So let's say they don't dissipate. Let's say you're just not paying attention to them at that point.
Okay.
That after a night's sleep, you kind of gotten back up and start to get all the sort of operative modes back in order, and you think they're gone because you're managing them again. Rather than begin to concede that whatever's happening is happening, however it's happening, and how it's impacting you, and starting in the most general way to simply concede that what's happening is happening regardless of what you think, what I think.
Yeah.
It helps disband some of the presumptive nature of this management style that we've developed to try to make believe we're not doing what we're doing. While we're doing what we're doing and we're witnessing what's happening, and we keep wondering why it keeps happening and thinking we have nothing to do with it, and it's just a condition of humanity and all that kind of stuff that we come up with to try to divest our investment in it.
There's one ready.
Two, buddy. Sorry, my son's talking to me.
Can I make another if you want?
Yes, Jeff. I'm involved.
Well, in thinking of it in broader, simple terms, to notice their choices being made and notice that somehow you have something to do with it. You don't even have to understand that you have something to do with it to say, like you just did, I'm involved. That alone very often begins to, what I realized was that to the degrees I resisted, I thought I didn't know. And to the degree I began to concede, and the ultimate concession was everything's happening as it's happening. I'm doing what I'm doing, whatever it is. I'm choosing it. I'm responsible for it, whatever it is. Even the things I don't think I'm doing right now, I'm responsible for them. Began to allow that iceberg to melt from the light. And all of a sudden, I started seeing the things I thought were hidden and experiencing the stories that I'd held. All that kind of stuff starts to become obvious because I'm no longer trying to keep the beach ball under the water, telling the kids I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Sort of naturally starts to rise because effectively weightlessness is the absolute meditative state of awareness. There is no weight in it at all because there is no conflict. There is no potential for pressure. There are no pieces. There are no, that's the state we're in an essential basis. It's not necessarily the state we're witnessing in a human mental basis. It's our mentality that suffers, not reality.
Well, reality has no no feeling about it.
Yeah. Or thought because of
Or
that.
thought about it.
Yeah. So it doesn't think about itself. It doesn't have a self. It doesn't lie. It doesn't, none of the things that we're capable of doing within our mentality happen in reality. And if that is in fact our reality, it may be worth conceding it. I would say it's the ultimate value. To begin to introduce our thinking to our knowing is to begin to concede that we know, we're aware. We know more than we think. And that what's happening is actually evidence of what we know, the clarity, like I was just talking to Tom about. That's this idea that the experiences we're having is the curriculum. And if we didn't know better, we wouldn't have the awareness of what's wrong. And I would say everybody is pretty good at figuring out what's wrong, which is a pretty good indication that we must know what's right. We don't talk about the must know what's right because we think what's wrong is so intractable and so difficult because we think of it as something tangible and real rather than simply think about it as a byproduct of thinking, a manifestation of thought. It's an effect that we're creating that isn't real any more than the horror in a dream of being chased down an endless hall is ever real. It just seems real when we're in it. And when we think thoughts are real, we think we're in our thoughts. We think we become our thoughts. We think we're stuck in our thoughts. We think thoughts can attack us because any contrary thought to the one we're having, including thoughts that we have in our own experience that conflict with the other thoughts we have, seem to be an internal attack. And the enemy within has always been stated as the worst enemy we have. So we talk about those things, but I don't think we've been effective at beginning to unravel that seeming mystery that isn't a mystery at all because it's been operating this way for a long time in full view.
Two things. I do
Yes,
want to talk about mystery, so let's remember that one. But I was listening to a lecture of something, I forget what it was, but it talked about our negative proclivity is because of the tiger in the bush. If we think it's not there, we're going to be
right. Exactly.
And if we take a little caution and be a little aware and be a little frightened and anxious and move away from that rustling noise in the bush, we're most likely to survive. So, like,
good
negative tendency is innate in somehow of our evolved selves. So, always going to when the garbage disposal breaks in your kitchen.
The world's coming to an end.
The world is coming to an end, which
I
have
know.
had those world end things too. When I'm afraid of my own mailbox because
Oh my gosh.
something's inside it, you know that.
But let me suggest, Gabe, that when we're ignoring and denying and going numb to the things that are happening in our own psyche that we're creating, that we're manifesting, we're doing exactly what the guy is suggesting wouldn't help by making believe there's never a real tiger in the bush. We're imagining the tiger now is there when we think our thoughts are real, and it isn't there. And we're imagining the threat to be real, and our life is threatened when it isn't. And now we've become the tiger in the bush we claim to want to escape from, and we are the ones that are manifesting the impression that it's actually there.
Yeah, but it's part of our. I just wanted to say that it's part of the natural, evolved human that the tendency toward negativity or suspicion is innate, is part of us. Would you disagree?
It's a possibility. It's beginning to see that everything is possible. And some of those possibilities are not welcome. But I want to make the point again.
But some of those possibilities helped us survive.
Yeah. Most of them.
Yeah.
If not all of them. But if we're creating a possibility that's impossible because we think the tiger in the bush is actually our thought of a tiger in the bush, we now have become the perpetrator of the experience we're having about the tiger really being there while there is no tiger there. So think about this. We put our entire instinctive emergency response system in our body on edge, thinking there is a real threat when there is no real threat, and wondering why we feel negated and wondering why we think negative thoughts. We're trying to negate the thing we're doing while we maintain the thing we're doing. We become the slave and the master. We create it. We're the thesis and the antithesis simultaneously. And so where those natural instincts help us, this unnatural direction kills us. Anxiety and stress are associated to every disease. No disease is made better with more stress and more anxiety.
Exactly. Yes. Sadly, but yes. Yeah.
So being skeptical is not something that is unwarranted. It's actually healthy to begin to notice that there are threats around us, physical threats.
Yeah.
And if we're so preoccupied thinking about things that aren't real as being real, we're not going to pay attention to those things at all. We're going to be so preoccupied with the enemy within our own psyche, the seeming enemy in our own psyche, we're going to miss all of the natural instincts we'd have to say, something's wrong here. And we can sense something's wrong. But when I'm preoccupied in my thinking that my thinking is the source and my thinking is on a panic button all the time, I'm missing the cues and the clues and wondering why I keep doing stupid things that don't work, that don't add up, that seem to be repetitive. And they're never really repetitive because I'm newly re-choosing and newly re-choosing. That's the addiction. Newly re-choosing what I'm free not to. To continue to do it is to make believe I am absolutely blind to what's happening. And I have no better thing to do than to continue to repeat the thing that I'm trying to escape.
Okay. Mystery. If it is, right? The natural order, the infinite source, the absolute presence. If it is, we try to create the why. We literally create the why, even though the what already is. And I just
that is what is still a question.
And then we mull over it at the why and what are we here for, and instead of being here.
We actually are being here while we're insanely thinking we're not. That's the whole.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that beyond our little discussion here is, I think, throughout time and religions and philosophies and theologies about why and creating a mystery, and there's a myth and all these things about trying not to be present. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're kind of like distractions, like an addiction, right? Like I gotta have a drink. I gotta think these thoughts. I need to maintain these thoughts. I need to get to the bottom of the mystery. And the mystery is why I think there's a mystery, ultimately. Yeah.
Just always trying to create a story.
Yeah. Well, and when I grew up, I remember them saying the moral of the story is, and you don't hear them that much anymore. And the old stories used to be designed to offer principles up so that kids could see them and realize, oh, honesty is actually a probably better principle than dishonesty, and earning and producing is probably better than stealing, and love is probably better than hate because of the revenge and the cycle of hate that begins created when you start, you screw with somebody, they're going to screw with, it just goes back and forth and back and forth and back, and it feeds on itself. It's the same thing as what happens in my thinking. When I think a corrupt thought, I'm going to follow that corrupt thought with more corrupt thoughts to give it credence, to make believe it's true, to continue to make believe that it's something happening to me rather than something being caused by me. And I would say that inherent fear, Gabe, it seems substantial to begin to face it and begin to realize that the degree to which I don't think it is there is the degree to which I am absolutely ignoring it. Whatever it is, whatever the amount of it is. And in those instances, like Lensis suggested, I get that surge in my stomach, that electrical nausea almost when those little things occur. And I notice how quickly I'm sort of on guard, which tells me I'm still defending, I'm still defending, I'm still defending, I'm still denying, I'm still delusional in some ways in my thinking. Not I am delusional, I am still thinking delusional thoughts. I am still thinking defensive thoughts. I am still reacting. I'm choosing to do that in some vain hope that there's some payback I'm going to get someday from the interest I'm giving that.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same thing waking up every day with those same thoughts. So.
Well, it's a good indication. It's a good indication that we haven't talked honestly and openly enough to begin to actually express it and manifest it within our experience, so that the excitement and the joy and the potential for the day, all of the possibilities that could be constructive rather than the probability of the worst thing happening. I mean, think about that. To think that the worst thing that can happen is probably the least probable, right?
Yes.
On any given day, because most days we never find the worst thing probable, but that's what we're thinking about in the morning, is that potential. And there's nothing wrong with thinking about it. It's actually balanced thinking to think about those things. It's balanced to think about things that are disturbing in accurate terms, rather than in terms being used to justify the idea that I should have nothing to do with it, and I've got to continue to maintain my sense of I have to feel better about what I'm doing, rather than begin to acknowledge the disturbance and say, I can live with that. I can actually notice that if this is actually a threat and that threat occurs, I would be better off prepared for that threat by being healthy mentally and physically than I will be by being eroded by the anxious, acidic nature of my thinking that's toxic. When I'm going to try to ignore it and pretend that somehow I'm going to save myself from it. And that fourth thing that Sturgis, you remember the fight, flight, freeze, and he added fawn as the fourth now impulsive emergency instinct, which is to make nice to the threat.
Yeah.
Interesting that is enabling. It might work if you back off slowly with a bear or something. Some of that may work. But in the grand idea of that, people pleasing tends to give people the impression that everything they're doing is fine and that they are no threat to that person. So what do? Encourage the threat. As an instinct, it's healthy. As an addictive, reactive nature, it begins to enable the problem we're claiming we want to escape. We're actually causing it. We think we're helping when we're helping ourselves to the idea we're a big help, and we're actually helping somebody else get worse. And that line is not always easy to identify.
I don't know. I just thought that thinking there is no mystery was a good set of words.
Well, even in that recognition, it sort of indicates that you have some awareness of a greater sense of something that would be worth considering.
Yeah, if you're a part of it, you can't be mysterious about something.
Yeah, you can't be apart from it.
You can't. You're a piece of the puzzle, not staring at the puzzle from a third dimension.
So in sobriety, there's a very common slogan that it's our secrets that kill us. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sick as
and we're as sick as our secrets. Yeah. So imagine secreting blood, sweat, and tears as the consequence of making believe we can keep secrets. And it doesn't mean we need to tell everybody everything that's going on. That doesn't mean we're keeping secrets. It means we're just not providing a lot of useless information to people that they don't particularly need. We're talking about actually harboring ideas that are so caustic and so threatening that they're actually killing our body's ability to function in the name of thinking we're saving ourselves. And
I
that
like that.
the
I like
greatest
it.
secret is the idea that we're only what we think. That
Wow.
all I am is what I think, that all I am is this ego. I'm constantly trying to fix my ego and get over my ego. There's nothing to get over if it's simply a thought about a thought. It's
Let's all
Mm.
tell a secret. Let's all share a secret.
Oh, I have a good one.
Yes.
All right, what's
No, never mind. I didn't interrupt you.
Well, that's the
Sure.
ultimate secret, though. The main corrupt thought that leads to all the other corruptions is the idea that we're creating reality, that we are the makers of reality, that our thoughts are real and true. That single thought creates this fractured state of all these other multiverses. And think of the multiverses being a variety of stories we tell, perversions of the actual universe, which is a single voice, a single song. They're all those fractured states of things. And all of the little things we think we keep from each other as though they're small all track back to that one very, very large idea that consumes our nature and our attention as we give it to it and think someday we're going to make it true. We're going to make that thought real. We're going to make that thought true. It's never been true. It's never been real. It can't possibly be. And the more I think about it, someday I hope it will. And the only hope I have.
I'm not gonna gain weight from these potato chips. I'm gonna eat this bag and it's not gonna make me fat. That's the lie, right?
Well, the primary lie we're talking about now is the whole concept that our thinking is reality.
What I hate to interrupt, but this is perfect. The thing I love about you, what you gave me, is that when somebody says, "Hey, you're doing something," like let's say they say you're lying, and again you say, "Hey, not only am I lying to you or keeping it a secret, I'm keeping it a secret for myself."
Well, the secret is that there's no self to keep it to.
Ah, you always have. I love it. I thought I do everything, so I'm like, I don't even need to go. I've got the one key, but that's the last part I always forget.
Well, again, if we're thinking in absolute terms, to think of all things that are wrong individually would be to be lost for a lifetime trying to solve the mystery, as Gabe just talked about, rather than simply see that there is no mystery to the idea that we think thinking is real and true. We create mysteries to justify the fact we don't know what we do. And if we are the chooser of it, how could we possibly not know that we're choosing it? It would be impossible for that to be happening, because the things we don't have to choose, like our heart beating and the blood flowing and all of those things that are being done for us to even have the experience of choice, aren't things we're choosing, but every one of the choices we have that causes anxiety undermines all of those things in our bodily system's ability to function on our behalf in favor of survival, in favor of thriving. Not just surviving, but thriving. Thriving means having more than we need so that we have more to give. That's the abundant nature we have. To think of it as scarce is to think of a thought that's scarce, meaning so scarce it doesn't exist, as being the primary nature of existence. And the primary nature of something that doesn't exist as existence is, in fact, insanity. We're struggling with it at all-time highs, addictions at an all-time high. We've legalized drugs because they can't figure out how to deal with it. It hasn't helped people. It's actually been more pervasive use that we're witnessing. They've come up with a new drug to help people who are doing fentanyl survive. So now we've got a drug added to a drug to help people get the impression that being addicted to the drugs is safe. Now you can go ahead and use it all you want. We treat effects and don't look at the cause. Suicides at an all-time high in almost every category, if not every category, including single-digit kids. Imagine what kind of world they're stepping into, the real world that they're stepping into and sensing there's no hope whatsoever, to come to the point where they think the best thing they can do is kill themselves over generally a thought that somebody else is having, something someone else thought, something someone else said. It's happening. If we're interested, Gabe, to this other point about the tiger in the bush, if I'm constantly drawing my attention to tigers I think are in the bush that I put in the bush to give myself something to distract myself, I'm not a very good influence on all that's happening because I'm paying attention to things that aren't actually happening at all. And the idea that I'm incapacitated or have a limited ability to influence people is absolutely not correct. It's just another lie in the succession of lies used to justify it's the only thing I can do. To act on behalf of something that doesn't exist is the only thing I can do. How interesting that we could become so consumed with that and not notice that we're already within the absolute structure, state, principled nature of life, of reality, of truth, of all those things that would be the most productive things. We're all interacting right now together. We're all doing what we're doing to be impacting everyone, everywhere, with everything that's happening right now. And to count myself out is to think I don't count. And to think my thoughts have a basis when they have no basis is to feel like I don't count because I think I'm the thinking I'm doing that has no basis. I feel empty. I feel alone. I feel disconnected. I feel lonely. I feel like I have nothing to offer. I feel useless. And what else would there be to do but end it all? Interesting that we would end our body's existence for the sake of not giving up a thought. Think of the investment we have to have in that thought to make believe it is our life and our life depends on it. And if things don't go our way, we just need to kill our body. How deficient we must feel. And within the context of addiction, that's exactly what addiction is constantly trying to do what can't be done to escape what we create and yet wonder why we feel hopeless. To have hope in hopeless things is a hopeless venture. To have faith in faithless things is never going to be enough. You can't have enough faith in something that's faithless for it to be anything other than faithless. And what are those things? Delusions, insanity, not reality. Reality is absolutely faithful, and it doesn't require faith. It's just there. It doesn't say, believe in me or go to hell. Think about that. That's how we've humanized God and dispirited humans. And to any degree we play a part, we are the parts being played.
Tom has a question.
So I have a question because I really liked what you said about hope and the hopeless and faith and faithless. But what comes to your mind as something good to have faith in?
Something faithful.
But like what? What's faithful?
Well, I would say an absolute infinite nature that doesn't change would be faithful because it doesn't change. It's always going to be. It's like aerodynamics. You build the plane right, it's going to fly. It's like gravity, like we talked earlier.
It was always there. Yeah, they didn't.
Think about gravity. We always talk about wanting to be grounded. We're grounded.
Yeah.
And truth and faith and truth and beauty.
Well, and think about that.
Faith.
Here's the beauty in it. We've been thinking faith is so critical because we've been thinking more and more and more faith and faithless things as even possible, that when it comes to faithful things, we don't need faith at all because they've always been providing everything they are and is for us, always. So there's no belief. You don't have to believe them for that to be true. If you operate on any premise, you're operating on that premise. The fact that we've been delusionally thinking we're not is the idea that we need more faith because the faithlessness of our own actions and our belief in them has been what's creating that idea that we need more faith. We don't even need faith. You don't need to believe in something that exists for it to exist. We don't have to have trust in faith. We don't have to have trust in truth for it to be true.
Right.
So what happens is, and it happens here a lot, and I suppose there's many reasons, but in the awareness of those, is just in the reckoning with that, people get very quiet. The stories just vanish because the absolute awed, inspired awareness starts to become obvious. because we're not preoccupying and re-instigating new stories to help make believe if we preoccupy ourselves with more and more stories, we'll someday get them right. And we do it
Right.
collectively as a conspiracy to make believe somehow if we keep engaging, it's the only thing we can do because everybody does it. We seem to be absolutely certain what's wrong with everybody else while we're even struggling with our own sense of doubt. How crazy is that? Pretty crazy. You know, it is sad. It's horrifying to imagine we've been given everything and act as though we have nothing. There's nothing else I can do but this. The wrong thing in place of the absolute right thing.
Create some more experiences.
What's that?
Sam thought it was really funny when you said, I can create some really horrible experiences.
You can what?
You can create some really horrible experiences.
Oh, they're all created by us. I mean, what's interesting.
It was just really funny the way you said it. The way you put it in context was really hilarious.
Well, you can see that within the tragedy and comedy, what theater is, right? Theater has always been the acting out of these life dynamics to try to give us perspective. I mean, Shakespeare introduced to society the idea of talking openly about the dynamics of humanity. Before he came along, nobody ever talked about that stuff publicly because the royal families were considered God's descendants and everyone else was destined to live in hell on earth. And he started making jokes about it. Why? He thought he saw the humor exactly as you just did. So we have evolved to a degree, but if we're evolving on the basis of a subjective idea of self, we're basically just transitioning into an objectivity to begin to notice it. And the fact is, the absolute nature isn't a transition at all. It's just an absolute state of being that's always here, always now, always new, all possibility. The accumulation of everything that's ever happened is in the present. All the effects that have ever been created are here. If there's anything to do, it's here now. If there's any problem that's created, it's happening now. If there's any solution, it's the potential now to solve it. And what's the solution? To realize that delusion has never been any more reality than the idea that our thinking of itself creates ourself. There's nothing there. Silence is the nature of what allows all things to be heard.
Oh.
Darkness is the nature in this universe of what allows light to be noticed. What's interesting too is that light, when it travels through space, when there's no atmosphere, is dark. Light only appears when there's something for it to land on. So when I'm busy clouding my thinking with dark thoughts, I feel the darkness because I manifest the idea that the manifestation of these clouds is in fact real, and I think the sun is not out. I don't think I'm being shined on, when even when the clouds are out, the sun is always out.
I love that. The sun is always out.
And you know, Oprah and you're on mute. Remember those?
Yeah. Losing you a little.
Yeah.
Mary Williamson talk about that, how the sun is actually always shining. It's just the clouds. When you're in a plane, you go above the clouds and you see it.
But we say
Even if
things
it's
like
raining on
the sun is not out. Think of how that's like the horizon is the end of the world because it looks like it. It seems like it. You know what people feared when they thought the horizon was the doom? Was the horizon of their own thought about it. Because it wasn't true. their awareness was accurate, their assignment of responsibility was inaccurate. If nature is now natural, it's our nature.
Can I ask a question?
Another one?
The long road trip. No, I'm kidding. So what about hope you guys have 5 hours. No, so what's interesting to me, and again, I'm just driving and I'm just looking at this like beautiful expanse, and I can see a daytime moon and some mountains. And as I'm looking at it, I'm just adoring it. I got the most beautiful feeling in my heart. So now what I want to ask, because I really like a lot of the tools and filters and ways to be present, the tools to be present that you've really sort of talked about today, is what are your thoughts on, like, you know, and maybe this harkens back to an earlier conversation we had about waking up with negative feelings. What are your thoughts about, like, you know, what part does that emotion play? Like when you have that good feeling in your heart or your solar plexus, or that bad feeling in your heart, is that useful in guiding you to apply some of these practices that you're talking about?
Well, the essence of that awe and that inspiration doesn't change when we think it changes. So what's changing is our thinking about it, and as a result, our feelings are changing, because our feelings are our feelings are primarily feeling our thinking. But if you think of feelings and have the intimacy of that connection becomes obvious when you begin to realize that all feelings are defined by words that come from thoughts.
Right.
So what do you tend to tell me some of your feelings?
Well, no, like I said, like right now I'm looking at this beautiful expanse, and it just, I guess that would be authentic joy. Like I really feel joyful.
And you're also and I hear you eating something. I want to know what you're eating, because I want to eat that
I'm not
too.
eating. I am not eating. I have Invisalign.
That was his secret.
I was like, I want whatever he's eating.
No, I have Invisalign. I'll take him out. Sorry.
Hi, Anthony. I haven't heard you in so long.
I know, because that's when you're about to graduate. In the beginning, you're like, I know all the answers. I can't be. In the end, you're like, I don't know anything. Okay, you can go.
So Tom,
remember when you threw the flowers?
Oh. I'm sorry.
It sounds to me like you're asking how emotions fit in this.
Yes.
Okay. So if we're thinking, my experience is when I think bad thoughts, I feel bad. And when I think wrong thoughts, I feel wrong. And when I think empty thoughts, I feel empty. I feel useless. I feel non-existent. I feel like I have no place.
Right.
I don't belong. All of those things are, think of the intellect that's gone into the definition of a sensation that we're witnessing to be able to qualify it accurately as to the analytical accuracy of the premise.
Analytical accuracy. I love that.
If I'm thinking thoughts that have no basis, I feel alone. I feel disconnected. I feel apart from. And so what we're feeling is our thinking, because our body, that's a bodily function. Feelings are giving me perspective on my thinking so I can begin. That is my the contemplative advantage of thought. The fact that we can think about our thinking is to also notice that our thinking is conveying information in our bodily sensations that are called our body language, that isn't in words until we assign words to it. But the words we assign, in my experience, have been accurate. And when I'm disturbed and feel disturbed, to see it that way doesn't compel me to try to escape the disturbance, because I want to escape it when I don't think I should be feeling it. When I think it's something
Interesting.
that shouldn't be happening while it's happening, think of that. I think that thinking is in control of manipulating reality. There is no manipulation of reality because it never changes. It's an absolute state of being, an absolute state of essence, an absolute state of existence, life, reality, truth, all of the fundamental virtues, morals that would have any basis in an adventurous, inspired, awed existence. Productive, useful, gainful, beneficial, innovative, creative,
Right.
constructive. All of those things would just be natural byproducts. Think of how destructive and dysfunctional and all that we have become, and taken for granted that it's human nature. We've actually built into the lie that that's human nature, when it's simply been an addiction acting out that we haven't diagnosed properly. We haven't talked about it properly. We haven't diagnosed it properly. Bill Wilson did in the Alcoholics Anonymous, but the focus on AA still today is largely in not drinking today. It's a symptomatic recovery. The essence of that symptomatic problem in all compulsive, not just alcohol, in all compulsive behaviors, all impulsive behaviors, and all hyper-reactive behaviors, is coming out of this idea that the absolute nature is not our nature, and I need to create it, I need to find it, I need to get it, I need to practice how I have it, rather than begin to concede the present is, if the present is always present, I am, you are, we are always present. But watch your language around that, and you'll start noticing that you don't believe that's true. To be talking about your experience is something that you need to work on to get there. If you got to get somewhere, and the only place you ever are is where you are now with all you have, you're never going to find that place, and you're never going to get enough when you find it, when you think you find it. That's addiction.
That's fascinating.
The fascination,
one of the
fascination is a lot better than discontent and delirium.
Well, because again, I think what's so interesting is some of the, conversations that we're having now versus some of the conversations Jack and I were having at 6 a.m. And one of the phrases I used in just, kind of sharing about my experience was the story I told myself, which is so fascinating because, again, that really boils down to what we've been talking about today. And, the delusion or the lie or the, that you're creating, is so
you want to open another window?
Yeah.
The self you're telling the story to is a story.
Right.
There is no self. There is no self of that ego. We have formalized this idea of ego since the late 1800s. And the irony is, again, because all tracks back to an absolute nature, the essence of the word ego, guess what it is?
What?
Capital I. It isn't the false self that we've now come to name it, pretending it is us. Ego is, in fact, the capital I. We're, again, misusing, bastardizing, perverting the actual meaning of it from the beginning. Cogito ergo sum was, I think, therefore I am.
Oh.
And the fact is,
that's interesting.
I am, therefore I think.
What does Webster say ego is?
I find a dictionary and check it out. I'm not suggesting there aren't all kinds of definitions. I'm talking about the etymological root of the word.
I have superego. What's superego? Have you heard of that?
Well, Freud divided ego into 3 different things. He created the unholy trinity to try and make believe that somehow or another identifying it further. I mean, this is where I had my first major panic attack when I realized I was writing about ego, and it hit me that I was writing about something that didn't exist. And I thought if I defined it better, I'd resolve it. And I realized I was the problem. The thinking I was doing was actually trying to confirm that thing existed, and I had to manage it. and my whole body turned gray. I looked like an alien for about 2 hours.
We're looking for aliens in Mount Shasta.
Well, there's 2 of them in your car.
Yes.
I mean, think about us as a species, thinking we don't belong. Aren't we the aliens that we've been afraid of finding in space and yet captivated with making believe they're out there rather than here?
Right.
We're the greater threat. We keep thinking of aliens as being some threat. We are those aliens. We're actually creating the idea, the enemy within. If I'm not seeing that I'm creating it in a delusion, I'm actually acting as though there's an enemy without to justify it in the same way that I think it's real in my own thinking. I'm not suggesting there aren't other beings in the universe. I would imagine there's plenty of room for plenty of beingness in our universe. I'm not going to confirm it or deny. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is. Whatever they are, they are. However it is, it is. I don't need to get into a discussion, an argument over to mire myself in another endless loop of thought. To concede that if it is, it is. Same with an absolute nature. I don't need to say it is and argue over it, but simply suggest if it is, it's probably worth considering. And if we consider it, which is a contemplative meditation, an awakened contemplative meditation, it's to begin to see that it's always where we are. And the application of any thought in that direction is confirmed by the awareness that immediately starts to become incredibly expansive. And I hear a lot of people, when I talk about this in group, say, I sense something's right. I feel something's right, but I don't understand it. So their struggle isn't with the rightness and the knowing. The struggle is with the thinking about that rightness and the knowing, because the understanding we've been using has been based on misunderstanding so long, we think misunderstanding is in fact understanding. And misperception is in fact perception. And nature is unnatural, and health is unhealthy, and disease is normal, but miracles are healing. That's not true. Our bodies are absolutely designed to heal. Morning, Jana.
Hey, Jack, I love what you're saying. I missed the show, and I was wondering what time I had to set my alarm for to get it. I forgot I'm in USA again. I was starting to set my alarm, and that's why last week I missed. So sorry about that. But if you're saying that everybody knows everything and it's just a matter of accepting in nature, why do you have to use words to convey it? You never can just convey it any real other way except for some words, and they never get it. And
we're not
also
struggling. We're not struggling with the being nature of knowing. We're struggling with the thinking, which is what words are based in. So we don't need to say anything about the absolute nature for the absolute nature. That's what I said earlier about trust and belief and hope and faith and all that.
Yeah.
We don't need any of that in actual reality. It's only the ulterior, alternate realities that we seem to create that we need the faith in, and there won't be enough faith to ever bring them into reality while we seem captivated and intoxicated with our ability to think them.
I got a question for you too, Jack, which is, I really love what you're saying. I only got a couple pieces of it, which are good, but it's funny that not after all these years of talking about it, not one person picked up everything, right? It's just impossible to get everything. You can get a lot of it, you can get, and most people don't get any of it, but it's funny how nobody could just comprehend everything you're saying, right? It's impossible.
Well,
Anthony, why are you whining? You sound like a whiny little boy. Snap out of it.
I'm great. It's a grateful. I mean, it's like, it's so
Just knock
incredible.
it off. It's not attractive. We know the regular Anthony.
Comprehension, though, if you think about comprehension and apprehension, is trying to hold on to something. There's nothing here to hold on to. And we've been so used to thinking we need to identify the thoughts to be right that we think this is that same thing, and we need to do all of it to be able to have any of it. And that's not true, because if we are it. We are based in it. We don't need to think of it at all for that to be the case. And if you listen through any of those near-death experiences on the things on the announcement, you'll hear people talk about their experience when they were near death as being considerably, they weren't afraid of dying. They were actually afraid of coming back into their bodies because they knew that the experience they had being out of their body, having that sensation, was so spectacular and so inspired and so whole. And so every one of them said, I felt home. I felt like I was at home, suggesting what we've been doing with our bodies has been a miscalculation and a misperception and a misunderstanding and a misapplication for human history. And it isn't a surprise that there are times during time that have been transitional periods of thought. There was a point at which zero didn't exist within mathematics. And it took years for Western culture to assimilate that and to see the wisdom in it and to begin to utilize it. It was initially thought to be black magic, satanic, dark forces, anti-social, anti-God.
Let me ask you a quick question. Did it exist before they discovered it and they just discovered it, or when they figured out the zero, that's when it existed? Did it exist the whole time and they just didn't know it?
Spend some time on that. I mean, if there's an absolute source, it would already contain all of the potential. Whether we discover it or not does not mean it doesn't exist. It simply means we're not utilizing it.
You like to use the Wright brothers example, like before they did it, or did it exist and they discovered it, or did it already exist?
They saw birds fly. They thought man can fly. That was the whole premise of their initial. The difference between trying to do something that's impossible and trying to do something possible is that trying to do something possible will reaffirm the possibility as small steps are taken. If I'm trying to do something impossible, I am constantly plagued with a sense of impossibility. So trying to overcome that growing sense of impossibility is impossible because the attempts I'm making are giving me confirmation of its impossibility. Doesn't mean I couldn't eventually do something that's challenging if I'm on a course that it actually aligns with reality and the nature, the laws of nature, the laws of order, the laws and terms of life within the universe.
Well, when somebody says they're going to send invisible waves through the air and it's going to go into this box and make a picture here that you can watch, I mean, that sounds impossible, right?
No, it sounds like what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But before that, it sounded impossible.
No.
And somebody
I'm
says,
talking about right now, and I'm talking about through history. People have been imagining things in their brain box that seem to be imagery that are conveyed telepathically and between us, is seemingly invisibly. But what seems invisible is visible to understanding. If understanding is used properly, substance is seen accurately. The things we can't see visibly, we can understand, and think of how we use the term understanding as a form of seeing. If we're misunderstanding, we're really just swinging at balls that aren't being pitched. Speaking of the Dodgers. So the futility of it becomes obvious if we're heading in a direction that can't happen. And also the question is, why would we want to go in a direction that can't happen unless we were trying to prove the impossibility of our thoughts were true? There's the addiction, going off on these deep ends, investing further and further and further and further in something that's a loser, thinking someday it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
If you multiply a penny times 2 for a month, you've got over $11 million. Imagine being at a blackjack table and thinking that doubling down, you're going to eventually get even. Imagine how much money that would take, how quickly it would get to the point that you could break even, but it may take millions of dollars before that happens, depending on what your losses were. So the point is, if we're affirmed in what we're doing, we'll know it. and be encouraged while we're sensitive enough, rather than operating on that desensitized stupefaction of dumbing down and numbing our experience by making believe we're not and shouldn't be doing what we're doing while we're doing what we're doing and pretending it shouldn't be happening, rather than saying, if it's happening, it's happening, and it might be worth mentioning or thinking. It may just be worth noting that everything that's always been happening has always been happening, and it's always happening now for all of us all the time. Now. What does that mean? It's always possible to do anything that's possible. And it's possible to think the impossible is possible. That's one of the possibilities.
I love when you were telling that story about how somebody you were working with and helping, and then you said, "Hey, what's going on?" And then they said, "Apparently everything."
Yeah.
Apparently everything.
That was Hawkins. But see, he had that glimpse. He began to notice the expansiveness.
Just a little bit, a little more. Yeah.
A little more expensive.
Morning, Jeff. So effectively, what we're doing is beginning to see that the horizon of our limited thinking is not limited. That is the beginning of everything else. It isn't the end of anything. And within that concept, you could begin to see the relationship between subjective and objective seeming reality. This idea that I create my own reality, and also see that there's also something going on beyond it that isn't a threat. It's intimately a part of the same thing. Then the absolute becomes a little easier to see, because it becomes obvious that if limits are limited, and objectivity doesn't mean necessarily unlimited, it simply means seeing beyond the limits of the subjectivity that we're all capable of experiencing, because each of us thinks for our own brain, with our own brain. The thoughts that we have are coming from our brain, our choices. We each get to think whatever we want. And if that's the case, we want what we think. We also want what comes, because it's going to teach us whatever may be half-baked in the thinking we did to get it. And when we think our thinking is right, we think those circumstances that are lessons are something opposed to us and wrong and shouldn't be happening. So again, we try to ignore them and deny them and go numb to them, and lose the opportunity to grow from them and learn from them, and let the natural teaching process be part of our daily existence and experience.
And you're saying that person you're thinking about is not even really you. That's the key part, right? That all this thinking that goes on, the overthinking, isn't even really to yourself.
It isn't to myself, it's to my thinking.
It's to somebody you think you are. Overthinking to somebody you're not.
If there's no self there to think to, all I am thinking about is my thinking itself, not myself, yourself, ourself, themselves.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my thinking itself. And when I begin doing that, I begin to utilize it as an innovative, creative, intelligent source. My bodily functions depend on this thinking. If I thought eating meant feeding my ear, I would starve to death. Thinking correctly means doing things that support productivity and benefits, not just for me, because I'm not only surviving, but thriving. Having more than I need allows me to not feel as though I need to take from anyone else, and can give everything I've been given, because we've already been given everything. Operating naturally, there would be so much abundance, people would be sick of having things rather than sick from trying to get more of things.
Jack, science called that supraconsciencia.
Superconscious?
Yes, supraconscious.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, that awareness is an all-knowing state. Omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, which is omnipotence.
Yes.
But that omni means all inclusive, nothing divided, nothing. It's indivisible, immutable, inviolable. We can think it isn't, And that's where our seeming troubles begin. And when you begin to realize that we're free to think those things, you can think those things and laugh at the thought rather than take it so seriously because you think it's personal.
Exactly.
Because you think there's a person attached to the thinking you're doing.
Exactly.
Think of people don't tend to like to have people laugh at them while everyone else laughs. Because they're thinking who they are is the persona they've created within the thinking, and they're not. That's just an imposter.
Yes.
It's literally an alias. So if we can laugh about
Jack,
it
what about
collectively,
imposter?
what's that?
What about imposter syndrome?
Yeah, why would it be a syndrome if it weren't an addiction?
It's an addiction to not feeling like you are capable.
It's an addiction to making believe you're not who you are.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about an imposter as an imposition, and an imposition as the weight we talked about earlier regarding the gravity. The weight I bear, the gravity of the situation, is the resistance I have to reality because I create pressure. But the fact is, I'm creating pressure against something that doesn't exist. So I've got two non-existent thoughts that are fantasies operating against each other, and I'm actually manifesting an effect from that. So thoughts manifest effects. They don't create reality. What are those effects? How I feel, how I function, how well I function. So an imposter is basically an imposition, a position I take. You know what the word imp is?
No.
An imp is like a mischievous little devil.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
an impostor is effectively one that assumes false identity or title for the purpose of deception. That's the
Coincidentally,
definition.
impossibility has that same imp there. Impossible.
Yeah. So if I think my thoughts are real, every position I take, I think is the only position to take. What do I end up? Feeling opposed to every other position that anyone else takes. What does that mean? Every thought they have that doesn't align with me, I take offensively. Why? Because I'm in a defensive position that I've taken. I'm in a position that requires defense because it has no basis in reality. So by defending it, I'm presuming there's something to defend, because why would I defend something if there's nothing there? That would be insane. And it's exactly what I'm doing to try to make sense out of doing it at all. It's kind of like telling a guy to guard the door because there's $1 billion worth of gold there and there's no gold in the building. Think of the risk you would put someone at, having them imagine that and having them imagine they're the only potential defense against it. And it's exactly what we're doing on our interior experience.
Yeah. What does ego say in the dictionary?
All sorts of things. But I think the best point about it is that it tracks back to I. And think about, I am thinking to myself. I'm obviously schizophrenic to think I have a self to think to or talk to.
What's the
Think
first
about
one
that.
that said? What is the first one that it says?
I'm going to let you define that, Anthony.
Because I'm an expert in the field.
No, because you have a dictionary. I mean, the way we use it is to justify it's something real. And the fact is, it's literally thinking about thinking itself, causing us to make believe that's ourself. And all we're doing is thinking about the thinking we're doing as being the source of ourself. That again shows that we think thinking is reality and our only source. And yet we are sourced in an absolute nature of reality and truth that we are products of, not the creators of. So
That sounds like the
narcissism,
beginning of the Twilight Zone. That's how the Twilight Zone always starts, right? I love what you're saying. The difference between shadow and light.
So shadows depend on light. And there has to be an obstruction, some matter to cause the shadow. Otherwise, light is unobstructed, it's pure white. Love effectively would be the combination of all colors is pure white. That has notoriously, historically been the idea of love, pure white, absolute. Being blinded by the light is seeing nothing but light, no depth, no sensation of distance, no sensation of apartness, no sensation of objects, no shadows, no haunting images. And the light we're talking about isn't the sunlight. This is all metaphoric. Our universe is metaphoric for this ultimate aspect of reality.
Amazing.
So listen to the people that have near-death experiences and they see the light. Sometimes it seems to be at the end of the tunnel they need to go through. Tunnel vision probably creates that. If we know, it would be well worth admitting we know, or conceding we know, or simply considering we know. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to have faith in it. We don't have to believe in it. If something is true, it would be true, regardless of all those other things we think we need to do about it.
You know what the truth is, though, right? You know what the truth is.
Well, but to your earlier point, Anthony, this essence of truth is not based in language. It's not based in space and time. And we are a product of it. So if that's our nature, the one thing that would be, in my experience, that is obvious to me is a sense of peace that comes when I'm not creating a major disturbance. And what is that peace? Silent, still, current, light. All of those words, think of those words. Still, both have different. Still, always remains, always here. Light, heavy. Light in versus heavy, and light in terms of bright. What do we think about in terms of intelligence? Brightness. He's bright. He's radiant. She's radiant. They're enlightened. They're
dull.
brilliant.
He's
brilliant.
dull.
All words talking about expressing light. Current, now, current. What is now? Always new. The flow is always new, but it can't get old. That means we're not in space and time. We're witnessing the absolute nature of nature in the present, making believe all we are is in the past or future, thinking that by constructing that story, it will prove it because of the intoxication we have to make believe is true, or fantasy is reality. Doesn't mean we can't think those things and we can't refer to those things because they're kind of convenient to mention what we did yesterday. If it adds up to something we can use it for today. But it doesn't mean that thing we're thinking about is any more than what we're thinking. Just what we're thinking about yesterday that we're thinking about. It isn't back there somewhere I have to go get. So when I think my problem came from a family issue that happened 40 years ago, and I've been nursing the problem for 40 years, the problem has nothing to do with what happened and everything to do with what I've been thinking about it for 40 years and continue to think about it now if I still see it as a problem. Healing is natural. It's not a miracle. It's not grandiose like we talked about earlier. It's not arrogance to imagine this is our nature. If this is our nature, it would be arrogant to imagine it isn't our nature. It would be prideful to imagine that we don't have this capacity. And what is that considered? One of the deadly sins. Pride, arrogance. What have we interpreted as? That we're just lowly little creatures, and to be anything more than that means we're arrogant and we're prideful. When in fact, gratefulness is actually the fullness of greatness being expressed. We don't need to be grateful when we're in awe of everything. We're naturally full of the greatness and can't be any less than grateful. The idea that we need to constantly think of gratefulness suggests we're constantly not grateful. We're trying to overcome the thing we claim to want to be doing. So.
Hey, Jack, I just want to introduce my friend Lauren, she's on the cell phone. She's driving. I told her you've been sober how long?
37.
And that's great. And I said less than that. So 37. And Lauren just had 15 years. So Lauren, this is Jack in the group. And then just say hi, Lauren, if you want.
Hi, Jack. Thank you
Hi,
so
Lauren.
much for letting me listen in.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're capable of listening.
Thank you.
That is sometimes
Congratulations on 15 years.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's a good start, Lauren.
Yep. One day.
And I'm sorry you know Anthony.
We met at a meeting. She's from Carmel Valley, Jana. We met at the meeting at the church there.
Yes.
Bravo.
You're welcome to come any week you'd like, Lauren. If you want to email invite, I'm happy to add you to the list. I appreciate you all coming.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you. I would be happy to have you here and add to the conversation. Jeff, it's good to see you today, and I want to thank you all for coming and being here.
In a few minutes, can we just open it up for 5 more minutes, just to humor me, so to speak, so she could see how a genius you are, Jack?
Well, I'll tell you what. This is all being recorded, I believe.
Oh yeah, when I said genius, he made sure it was recorded. Did you guys notice that?
Well, I forgot recently. We did 2 hours recently, and I forgot to press the
Lauren,
record.
what's your definition of ego? What does ego mean to you? Because that's what we spent a long time talking about.
I think ego is defined differently by many people, but for me, I think it's when you're just in self and you're not branching out to others. And I think we're here on this earth to always help others. And so, and especially in the disease of addiction, focused in on, with alcohol, and that can cause you to just be in the self-serving ego light. And being sober, you get the chance to step away from that and really truly live the way we're meant to live.
If you listen, thank you too for your thoughts, and clearly the direction of heading outside of this subjective seeming reality we create begins to announce to us that there is a lot more going on than we ever thought was going on. And so things we thought were impossible start to become very possible and seem unexpected because we've had such low expectations based on the thinking we've been doing as being so narrow and so pitiful and so demoralized. So today we talked a little bit about ego. You might be interested in listening to that, Lauren, through the Apple podcast or whoever you listen through.
I'll send that.
Because that really is the crux of the disease. We're talking about the mental obsession as being the nature of the disease of all compulsions, not just alcohol, not just drugs, not just sex, not just gambling, not food, all of them, every compulsion. And there are thousands of attachments that we all have to any degree. I have an obsessive thought. I'm attaching to something to maintain that thought. An excuse I'm using, a person I'm using, a situation I'm using, a memory I'm using, something in my environment I am using to maintain that thought, to create balance, because we're naturally balanced. Even when we throw ourselves out of balance, we come up with a way to maintain balance, even when that way is sick. So I invite you to listen, and we will continue to talk about it. I appreciate you all for being here. And thank you for bringing Lauren, Anthony, and good to see you, Jeff.
You're just
Jana.
on fire. I feel like I'm really privileged to hear you, Jack.
Bye, Jackie. Bye, Jack. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Everybody.
Jackie and Tom, have a great trip.
Thank you.
Jackie, are you coming to Maui?
I'm coming. It's a
Hi,
spiritual
Lindsay.
miracle.
Bye, Lindsay's. Bye, Dad.
Bye,
Bye,
Anthony.
and aloha.
Jack, you were on fire. How would you summarize? Can you give us just a little quick summary of what we talked? You said you were going to start doing that. Remember, you were going to wrap.
You act like he's your personal concierge. You want him to look in the Webster. You want him to round things up. You want him to entertain you. Knock it off.
Anthony, re-listen to this and just take a minute out. And
Well, I just wanted you to wrap it up one more time. I love when you wrap stuff up.
I know you just wanted me to do that 5 minutes ago. We're a little beyond the time frame that I set.
Jack,
I
I'm so
always want
happy to
more.
be
I
here
always want
today.
more.
Thank you, thank you. Well, Anthony, you've got more. You've already got it.
Anthony,
So I'm
don't
gonna.
forget you could pay me.
Nobody wants me to have more. Everybody's like, no, you can't have more.
You already have it.
You're being selfish with Jack.
Yeah. Love you guys.